and welcome to Hello, It's Us, a program based on the premise that life in general goes better if it's all of us working together, as opposed to you, me, and them all working across purposes. Hello, It's Us is brought to you by a collaboration between the Center for Disabilities and Development, the Extended Dream Foundation, and all the good folks here at Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham, one of your hosts. Keith Ruff, my co-host, down on the end. And today we're happy to have our good friend and one of my co-workers, Mike Hoenig from the Center for Disabilities and Development. And we're going to discuss blindness today. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Keith.
And I guess we start at the beginning, and you have been blind since birth.
Right. I was born with a condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis. It's a retinal condition, and there are approximately 3,000 of us living with it in the United States.
Wow. That is quite a small group.
It is.
So what are your kind of first memories of life?
Well, actually, I grew up on a farm, and my very first memory of life was when we were going to buy a new truck. That was a big event in our household, and I remember riding out with Dad in a real old truck and looking for a new one. And then I remember, I guess a lot of my other early memories are being with my family and celebrating birthdays and things like that when I was small. And then when I was either 3 or 4, I went to what was called a preschool institute at the Iowa Braille and Sight Saving School in Vinton. And that was for me to get used to the school that was going to end up being my home for the next, about 11 years. So I went up there for the day, walked around, I remember, with my family, and then spent quite a bit of time with some of the students that were already there, so that I would, find out what it was going to be like up there. I remember that, and then I also, of course, remember some trips up to Iowa City where they checked my eyes and also did some psychological, testing and visiting with my parents to help them figure out how to start coping with blindness, because that was something that was very new to them. I don't know how far you want me to go. I remember going to Head Start very distinctly before I started school at the School for the Blind, which we often called IBSSS, or sometimes even just the Braille School for short.
How was the Head Start program?
It was a very good experience. One of the things that I remember there is, being in a fairly small. I grew up in Fort Madison, Iowa, so and all of our relatives were, white, and nobody had a disability, at least that they claimed. And so I remember going to Head Start and meeting my first African American child, meeting my first Mexican American person, and also meeting my first person. In those days it was called mental retardation. Now we use the word intellectual disability, but I just remember those experiences, and just actually having the opportunity to spend time with kids my own age kind of for the first time. My sisters are quite a bit older than I am, so all those were new experiences. It was a real good experience to help me get ready for school.
How old were you when you, I don't know whether we say discovered, learned, whatever, that not everybody was sighted, or not everybody was not sighted?
Well, I don't know when I made that distinction. I guess from the time I could remember, I knew that people could navigate and talk about seeing things and seeing colors, and I knew that I couldn't do that. And then, when I was 5, obviously I went away to a school where everybody was either blind or partially sighted, except obviously for some of the teachers and house parents and so forth. So I definitely knew the distinction by then. But I think it was probably part of my consciousness for a long time, because I can remember cousins coming to the house when I was, 3 or 4 years old, and being able to run and find toys and find the, things around the house. And if I went into somebody else's house, and, I couldn't do that. So I knew then that there was certainly a difference.
How'd that make you feel?
I guess I never really thought about it too much. I remember when I was a little older, there was a period of time when I really resented the fact that I had to go away to school. But as far as being different and not being able to see, I guess I never really felt sorry for myself or didn't feel it was a bad thing. It was just something that was different.
How did it feel being away from home that much?
Well, at first it was a real difficult situation. I mean, I was close to my family, and Vinton was 3 hours away from Fort Madison, so it wasn't like I could just pop home, and I really missed my family, and it just didn't seem natural. But over time, as I made friends and everything, that sort of became my second home, because I was there for 9 months out of the year. And there came a point in time, even when a lot of times when I had the option to go home on weekends, I didn't, just because there were lots of things, ball games or camp or something going on at the school that I didn't want to miss. So, but it was a big adjustment, and it was always tough at the end of the summer when I had to go back to school, because I had gotten used to being home then and that routine, and so that was always a challenge. But I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah. Keith and I often talk about the difference in being born with a certain disability as to acquiring it. And the being used to whatever you do with whatever situation it's in, that's normalcy. For somebody who starts out with it, and somebody who acquires it has a very different view of it. There's the argument about whether people are broken and whether people need to be fixed, and that whole kind of thing. And clearly, I embrace the I'm broken side. There's no doubt about that. If there was some way to be fixed, which I know there's never going to come for me, I would love to be able to do the stuff I had done before. I also have a very strong sense of your comment about I wouldn't trade it for anything right now. When I stop and think, I have like 10 to 12 nieces and nephews that if my situation had not occurred, wouldn't exist.
Wow.
Because brothers followed me to Des Moines after I finished school, and went to work there and met their wives, and the likelihood that would have happened
Right.
had they not come to live with me and help me is pretty infinitesimal. And a lot of the people that, including you guys, that I've met over the years, that wouldn't have happened. And it's hard to think about all those people and different situations not have been in my life. But, we adjust to what we adjust to.
Well, yeah, and I think, everything happens for a reason. And, I've been asked the question many times about what I like to see, and I've come to the conclusion that it would be really handy. I'd like to be, I don't like to have to deal with a lot of the transportation issues that you face when you don't, drive, and you all know about that.
Yeah.
But I guess I've never actually considered myself as broken. Maybe because I've always been blind, I've just always seen that as a part of who I am, and
That's the way I feel.
yeah, I think and that's such an individualized experience that everybody feels differently. I mean, I I know that people, I knew a guy in Illinois once, Terry, that said, you know, if he could, he lost his, he became quad, I don't know, but 17, 18 years old, I don't remember. But anyway, he, and I'm not sure how honest he was being with himself, but he said if I could go back and change it, I wouldn't, because my life is 10 times better now than it was before I was in my accident. So, you know.
Yeah, that's always an interesting question.
It is.
And,
And for him at that time, anyway, that was his
Sure.
reality.
Sure.
and it's an interesting reaction that everybody has on the individual.
You bet. You know, that's and that's one of those things that you just have to, you know, and I think when you think about independent living and disability advocacy, I think that's what can make it a real rich experience, is that people bring such a diversity of experiences.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are times when people try to enforce their will on others about how they ought to be. You know, like one of my big pet peeves is when people tell me that I should have a guide dog. Well, they don't live in my shoes every day.
I know what
You know, and it's like, you know, how do you know? Why do you even say that? Just, you know, a lot of times, well, they're so beautiful, and, you know, but they don't stop to think about, you know, I love to travel, and I just despise the thought of having to worry about, okay, where's the dog going to go? Am I going to mess with having to, you know, take the dog on a cruise, or on, you know, and if I don't, then where am I going to board the dog?
Yeah.
And, you know, I just, but, so it's funny how people will just, you know, make assumptions that you should this or you should that without really knowing the reality of your experience.
And I can relate to that as well. I've had people for the last about 15 years trying to convince me to get a service animal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I can't take care of an animal.
Yeah.
Well, but you have people who work for you. Then they should get a dog. You know, I think it's ridiculous to think about getting a dog and not to be able to groom it, not to be able to
Right.
probably feed it. Certainly not take it out for a romp.
Well, exactly.
You know, it just would not be fair to an animal.
Yep, I completely understand that.
So you went through high school at Vinton?
I did. Oh,
Okay. And when did they start working with you or to explore what you were going to do after you graduated?
well,
I mean, that's still a big issue now.
yeah, or what am I going to do when I grow up someday? But anyway,
I have a
I,
brother who contends you got to grow old, you don't got to grow
that's
up.
true.
And he is living proof of that.
Well, let's see. I guess, well, I think, I mean, I always had an idea that I was, you know, going to go to college. And then when we were in, I think, 10th grade, I remember we had a class in career education at the school. You know, to just start thinking about, you know, what's going to be the next step. And then counselor from the Department for the Blind came and started talking about my future when I was a, I don't know, sophomore or junior. And so those two things, I guess, were the start. And then I went out and I found out I really wanted to have some work experience, and I found out about what was then called the CETA program, which was an employment training program, and I don't remember what all the eligibility criteria were. It had to do with, I think, having a disability or maybe being from an underserved population. Anyway, I qualified for it, and I really thought I was going to go into geriatric social work. And so I did some work at the nursing home through the CETA program after I graduated from high school and headed off to college in the fall. So that was, you know, that became my first real job, so to speak. And after 2 years of that, the CETA wouldn't let me go back into the same program because they said that I had to explore other jobs, and I didn't want another job, and so nursing home hired me for the summer, which was pretty cool. So that's you know, that's how I sort of entered the, you know, started finding, and I think that nursing home job was really helped for me because even though I didn't end up, you know, quite going into that field, it developed a lot of my what they call soft skills, you know, getting there on time and getting along with coworkers and doing extra work and all those kinds of fun things.
Sure. Yeah, I guess my experience was kind of unusual in, I guess, in that I came to the disability party before I was ever injured. The summer between my junior and senior year in high school, I was a supervisor on a playground for folks with intellectual disabilities between the ages of 5 and 22.
Oh, really?
And I fell in love with it. I mean, it was not the job that I had applied for. I had applied for a job on, the quote, regular playground. And the person who had been hired for this job found another full-time job like a week before it started, and they called me and asked me if I wanted to do it. And I had almost zero experience with people with disabilities. And I told them, I'm not going to guarantee I'll make it through the first day, much less the whole summer. And as I said, I loved it, and my intent at that point was to go into special education. And it wasn't until later on when a voc rehab counselor told me I couldn't do that, they wouldn't pay for it, that I gave that up.
Well, that's interesting because I actually had a voc rehab counselor tell me that I should go be a computer programmer. And I had absolutely zero interest in doing that. I never forget, he used to come visit me when I was doing my nursing home work, and he just thought that was the biggest joke because he didn't think that was what, but that's what I wanted to do. And if I had been able to find a niche, that's probably where I'd end up. But at that time, there just wasn't the whole geriatrics field was just kind of getting started, and social workers were not paid to go work full-time at a nursing home, so.
Yeah. Well, mine told me that I should be a speech therapist.
I see.
Because I could do that at home. And anybody who knows what speech therapists have to do know mine are not the hands of a speech therapist. The kids and people might have started talking clearly just out of fear, but
well, and a lot of that you can't really do at home either, that's,
no.
Mike enjoy of my opinion. How do you feel about the future plans for the school?
I don't know what who knows, that's a moving target. I just know that the school is closed, the residential component of the school is closed, and they're, at this point, I think, some of the administrative offices are still used for some of the administration of what's now called the statewide, what is it called? The statewide system for the visually impaired. There's another title, and for some reason it's eluding me. But the students are now served by itinerant teachers throughout the state, and then they do have I think they have some short-term, like summer school and other types of short-term placements where students can come, but the majority of the students are served through their local districts. And I like the fact that they can be around their families and grow up within their home communities, but they are losing so much by not having that daily exposure to, whether it's learning to cook or learning to navigate, and not having you don't have an excuse. When you've got blind teachers and so forth that get back and forth to school every day, you don't have any excuse for not getting around. And I mean, the teachers, when I was at the Braille school, I mean, they weren't just all about, academics, but just how to function. I had a teacher that used to call me out on forgetting to wear my belt. I had a teacher one time call me in after class. It was a shop class, and I thought, oh, God, I wasn't one of his favorites anyway. And I thought, oh, what do I do now? So he waited till everybody left, and he said, I saw you down at the pizza place last night. I said, oh, you did? And he said, yep. And he said, are you aware that people usually tip when they leave? And I thought about it, and I said, well, I know Mom and Dad did, but I guess I didn't think I had to. And he said, well, you don't have to, but, it's just something that people usually do. And it's one of those things that you wouldn't notice necessarily not being able to see. I mean, I think people forget how much, or don't realize how much you pick up from visual learning and visual cueing. And So I was always grateful to him for that and told him so, that, those are things that we miss out on, and these kids that aren't getting residential education now are missing out on it.
Wouldn't that be one of the things that you would have thought had been covered at school sometime?
I don't know.
Or,
I mean, there's
or
not
is
an
it
etiquette class anymore.
Well, but I mean, there's so many things in school now, I think they should be covered.
Oh, they
And
should.
just a lot of the common sense stuff. And given the fact that that instructor saw that with you, I would have thought that the next logical step for him would have been to talk to somebody and go, hey, here's the deal.
And
I noticed this. How many other kinds of issues might there be that not having sight are students missing just because of that? Because the waiters and waitresses frankly could have cared less that you had a vision issue and thus didn't know you were supposed to tip from that. Probably just thought you were a cheapskate. And I just think there are so many things like that. Teaching kids in school some of the basic money management skills or interview skills or those kind of things.
I agree with you, but I think one of the things, I had a friend that taught at the Braille school, and then she went and was a consultant in another district when her position, when there weren't any, I guess actually she retired, and she went back to her home district, and it turned out that there was a blind student in that district. And the teacher, the kid was in 3rd grade and was just had all sorts of behavior issues. And the Mary Beth, actually, my friend, said, to the teacher, well, you can't let this go on. And the teacher actually said, well, but she's blind. And, she said, if she thinks she can get away with it now, it's just going to, continue.
Yeah.
And I guess my point being is that I don't think that the general ed teachers, like if a general ed teacher saw a blind child in that same situation and hadn't had the experiences that our instructors had, that teacher might not feel that they had should correct a blind child or a child with another type of disability because, my gosh, they've already got it so hard,
Well, yeah. And I guess wasn't thinking of it as necessarily correcting as giving a bit of information.
Well, it was. I mean, he
Yeah.
was doing it to try to help me be, a little bit better prepared. So it's interesting because when people talk about inclusion, no, you're right. I was in a segregated school setting for almost my entire, until I went to college. But the things like that helped me be much, better prepared to be included in society than if somebody had never said anything.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure there probably are lots of other things that you picked up one way or another that years earlier might have been helpful if somebody had said, hey,
You bet.
you may not be aware of this, but
Yeah,
because I don't think it's certainly a natural urge to tip or do a lot of things. Somebody presents you a bill and you ask, may I give you extra money, please? Doesn't work that way.
No, and I suppose as an adult I would have eventually figured it out. But I mean, I guess the point being that I think when somebody signed on to teach at the Braille school, that they signed on to be a mentor and, which made it a good experience.
Well, we've burned through our time.
We have?
We
Well, my
have.
goodness.
It just flew by, as it always does. We're most definitely going to have you back. We can't leave you hanging out there just having gotten out of high school. There are many interesting years we still have to cover.
And we would like you back for more updates on the answer idea that you're working on.
On the what?
The answer idea.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to have meeting about that tomorrow, so hopefully that'll be the next step.
We'll have to schedule another time.
All right.
Until then, thank you much, Mike.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody out there. I'll see you Saturday, Keith.
Yeah. Have a good week out there. Bye now.